Now, Sarah Wheeler, a distinguished record. Sarah was the first foreigner to be selected as the writer in residence at the US South Pole Station. It was based at McMurdo Station, and she hopped across the Antarctic in cargo planes and helicopters to find out how people operated and lived in the Antarctic and what the climate and landscape did to them. We'll be having questions and summing up at the end, but delighted to introduce you to Sarah Wheeler.
Polar exploration, Cherry wrote, is at once the cleanest and most isolated way of having a bad time which has been devised. It's a great pleasure to be talking about him here in this setting where so many polar explorers have spoken themselves going back over the years, although a number of them, I think, perhaps didn't speak quite so bluntly as he did. They set sail from Cardiff in June 1910. Here is the Terra Nova, the expedition ship, during a storm in the Southern Ocean on her journey south from New Zealand. She was a three-masted wooden whaler with auxiliary steam. So they arrived among the pack ice around Ross Island and the icebergs. This is a photograph I took nearby there. This is a dinghy in the midsummer, give you an idea of the scale, and that's not a big iceberg. So they finally landed here at Cape Evans. We've seen some pictures of that already. This is a photograph taken at the time of the Cape Evans hut after it had gone out. It's a prefabricated hut that was made in poplar in East London. It had seaweed insulation between the walls. This was taken by Scots photographer Herbert Ponting. And here's another shot of the hut taken by me a bit later on. I had a camp. That's my camp, in fact. I had those two little orange huts were a camp I had for a couple of months there that I shared with one other woman who was a painter. Just the two of us were there. So it was very cosy. And this is the officers' quarters, which they called the tenements. That's Cherry. That's Birdie Bowers. That's Titus Oates, Captain Oates. That is Cecil Mears, who's the dog driver. And that's at Atkinson, who was one of the two doctors. And they made it very homely. They brought things, obviously, to pin up and so on. Although Captain Oates, who was a very sort of Spartan individual, he only had one picture, which he pinned up above his bunk, which was of Napoleon, as I say. But I want to try and conjure to you a bit what it's like actually living in the Antarctic. This is my tent, where I lived for about 7 months in various places. This is, where is this? This is Glacier Mackay. I took this at midnight to give you an idea of how disorientating it is in 24-hour daylight, and you lose all your diurnal clues, and it is disorientating. Because I think sometimes those black and white photographs, you don't really get the flavour of it. Anyway, winter came, and they all had their jobs in winter. And there was an awful lot of science went on in the hut. This is Atkinson posing for Ponting in his laboratory. It's a photograph of the laboratory that I took when I was there to show that it's still there. Because, of course, there's no bacteria in the Antarctic. Things don't decay from humidity as they would here. The hut is at risk from other reasons, chiefly wind and snowdrift and so on. But at least the cold preserves things. That the non-scientists had to be deployed. And this is Cherry, and he was given the job of editing the expedition newspaper. This was a tradition that had started on Arctic expeditions in the 19th century. They would compose and print and illustrate and do everything and produce a newspaper. And the standard is really quite extraordinary. And this is Cherry typing it all out. And here is a photograph of a copy of one page, and it's a poem about the worst journey, in fact. This is a famous Ponting photograph of Scott's birthday dinner at Cape Evans in the hut on the 6th of June 1911. That's Cherry. There's Captain Oates there, and that's Captain Scott. And you can see any excuse for a party, and the flags came out. Now, that brings us on, seeing as we're on the first winter, to the winter journey. Now, this is the worst journey in the world. It was Scott who called it that. We'll come to that. This is Birdie Bowers, Wilson, and Cherry, and photographed by Ponting in front of the hut at noon on the day they left. Now, the winter journey to Cape Crozier lies at the heart of Cherry's narrative, both literally and emotionally. And here they are when they got back, looking about 100 years older. That's Cherry here, only 23, and that photograph's taken. This is me in the remains. This is me, and this is the Cape Closure igloo and the remains of it. To me, I mean, you know, possibly the most sacred site in the whole of the Antarctic. This helicopter, I was travelling with VXE-6, who are the airborne squadron of the US Navy, and they did a lot of the science support. So I travelled a lot with them, both in choppers like this one and on fixed-wing planes. I went to the South Pole with them. They called themselves the Ice Pirates. I called them Testosterone Airways. I need to say a word about penguins here. This is the author interviewing the locals. Because I know from the kind of question I'm regularly asked that it's the second most popular thing people want to know about life in the Antarctic. The first, of course, being the lavatory arrangements. The most numerous kind of penguins are the adelies, these little black and white ones. But the most lovable ones and the most famous ones are the emperors. And they grow to over 3 feet tall. Here's some of my favourite ones. These two fellows at the front talking to one another. And they have no land-based predators, and so they know no fear out of the water, and they come waddling after you with great curiosity and enthusiasm, and you can't shake them off half the time. This was very near Scott's Hut, because that is Mount Erebus there in the background. It's an active volcano and a tremendous landmark to all of us who've lived at Cape Evans. They were all terrified the ship wouldn't make it back to pick them up, the Terra Nova, but it did. This is when she arrived. They were jolly pleased to see her. Packing up was done in record time, and they were off on the way home. Now, I put this one in, as Ponting took this photograph. This is a fellow called Dennis Lilly, who was one of the scientists, a biologist. This is a sponge that he's just pulled up from the bottom of the Southern Ocean. There's another one there. I'm going to do the next bit with a reading from the end of my book. The world spun away from Cherry. In October 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 1, and a month later they shot a dog into orbit. Cherry had always felt that space was the next frontier after the Antarctic. We shall visit the moon now before very long, he'd once written, perhaps within the next 1,000 years. In 1959, the unmanned Lunik 2 crash-landed on the moon, and only 10 years after that, Neil Armstrong wobbled about on its craterous surface. Cherry was out of step with the times, as usual, but the worst journey continued to win all hearts, and requests for translation rights still arrived from distant corners of the world, 37 years after first publication. It was a source of deep satisfaction to him. The Antarctic had both redeemed and destroyed his life. Redeemed because it produced the worst journey, a superlative piece of art, the vaults above the human experience which gave it form. Destroyed because it fatally engaged his anxieties. His life was proof that emotion has its own chronology. After all, as Cherry acknowledged, we all have our winter journeys, sooner or later. And if you march them, he concluded, you will have your reward, so long as all you want is a penguin's egg. Thank you.